Today, we're diving into a really powerful story. It's all about what happens when the very foundation of your belief system starts to crack and you're forced to find a totally new way to move forward.
So the whole thing kicks off with this wild rumor that starts spreading in a high school philosophy club. I mean, what a premise, right? It immediately sets up the central crisis. What do you do if the divine figure you've always put your trust in is no longer reliable?
Now, this rumor, it's not just some silly story. It's actually a huge metaphor. It's through this fictional idea that the characters start to really grapple with that feeling. You know, the feeling you get when the belief system you grew up with starts to have holes in it and just doesn't seem to explain the world anymore.
And get this, the mistakes the creator is supposedly making are super specific. They're not random at all. They plug directly into some of our biggest modern anxieties, things like gender identity, migration, race, and this general feeling that evil is just spreading everywhere, unchecked. It really makes you ask, is God actually failing, or is it our understanding of God that's the problem?
And here is the punchline of the rumor, and it is just devastating. The hero of the story, the one who was supposed to rescue everyone, is suddenly out of the picture. He's stuck at home, dealing with a family problem. For believers like our protagonist, Abby, this is just catastrophic. It means the help she's been banking on her whole life, well, it's just not coming.
But right when everything seems totally hopeless, one of the characters, Evan, offers this completely radical way of looking at it. He says, what if the problem isn't a God who's failing? What if the problem is a God who is created with human flaws to begin with? A God who's forgetful, fallible, and imperfect, just like us. This just flips the entire script from divine failure to human projection.
So, as you can imagine, this rumor quickly becomes way more than just a thought experiment. For Abby, it sets off a deeply personal crisis. It tears down her entire worldview, leaving her feeling completely and utterly lost because all her old answers just don't work anymore.
And Abby's confession here is, wow, it is just so raw. It shows how completely dependent she is on some outside authority. See, she was never taught how to believe, only what to believe. So without someone giving her the answers, she feels like she has nothing. No truth, no direction, not even a sense of self.
Evan actually has a name for this state of mind. He calls it an illusory world. His whole argument is that when you build your reality on wishes, on identity labels, and on what you wish were true, you're living in a fantasy that's bound to shatter. He says the only way out is to start seeking what's actually real, not just what feels good.
Okay, so what do you do when your entire world collapses? Well, the story gives us three very different paths forward, shown through Abby's friends. Each one represents a unique response to this kind of crisis of faith.
Let's break these down. First, you have Rev, the accommodator. He tries to patch up the old broken system with new excuses. It's the comfortable choice, but maybe not the most honest one. Then there's Diesel, the rebel. His advice, just throw it all out. Believe in nothing. It feels freeing, but it can also be pretty empty. But then you have Evan, the challenger. He suggests a much harder path. Take responsibility for yourself. Seek out the real truth and work on mastering who you are.
And this leads us to the real psychological core of the story. Through this whole crisis, Abby is forced to confront this really terrifying idea. What if her entire belief system actually needs her to be a victim, forever waiting around to be rescued? This is the absolute peak of Abby's realization, and it's such a profound psychological moment. This horrifying thought that her suffering isn't just a bug in the system, it's a feature. The idea that her worthlessness is actually necessary to give her savior a job to do. It completely inverts her faith, turning it into this weird, codependent, almost cruel arrangement.
To explain the real danger of this victim mindset, Evan introduces a concept he calls the tempters. He argues that when you live in that illusory world, the gap between your fantasy and reality creates all this suppressed rage and resentment. And those toxic emotions, they don't just go away, they fester, and they become a food source for darker forces, both inside you and out in the world.
And this leads to Evan's brutal counterpoint to the classic idea of turning the other cheek. He argues that for real oppressors, the bullies, forgiveness without any strength behind it isn't a virtue, it's a meal. They actually feed on weakness, and just passively accepting it only makes them stronger.
So, if being a helpless victim is just a trap that feeds the darkness, then what's the alternative? This is where Evan proposes a radical shift in identity, from being someone who is saved to becoming someone who saves.
And you can see a really clear contrast here between two ways of living. On one side, you have the spectator. They're passive, defined by beliefs they've never checked and by false hopes, always just waiting for someone else to fix things. But on the other side is the savior warrior. They're active. And this isn't about literal fighting. It's a mindset of taking total responsibility, of seeking real wisdom, and committing to the hard work of mastering yourself. It's a huge shift from dependency to personal sovereignty.
And this isn't just a vague idea. Evan lays out a clear, practical path. Step 1. Stop waiting for a hero. Step 2. Reject those lazy excuses like everything is meant to be that keep you from doing anything. Step 3. Actively fill your soul with wisdom, not just blind faith. And finally, Step 4. Embody the virtues of the very hero you are waiting for. This is really the core message of the story. You stop looking for a savior the moment you decide to become one. Evan is constantly bringing the whole discussion back down to earth. To the real-world stakes, he keeps asking, what happens when our cozy fantasies smash up against a harsh, unforgiving reality? When the rescue mission is a no-show and disaster strikes, what's left? It's a question that really forces us to think about the consequences of what we choose to believe.
And that leaves us with the story's final, provocative thought. It turns the whole dilemma around and points it right at us. If the old ways fail, if the promised heroes are busy, if help just isn't coming, then that responsibility lands squarely on our shoulders. The story doesn't pretend to have an easy answer, but it forces every single one of us to ask the most important question of all.